Our first meeting felt like a moment straight out of a romantic comedy. It happened at a friend's backyard barbecue, where an accidental spill led to an awkward but unforgettable conversation. Logan had a way about him, charming, confident, and effortlessly funny. His humor caught me off guard, and before I knew it, we were laughing together, the sound of our joy blending into the summer air. From that day on, we were inseparable, drawn together by a connection that felt so natural, so inevitable, that I truly believed we were meant to be. When Logan proposed, our wedding felt like a dream. It was simple yet filled with love, shared with only our closest friends and family. Logan was excelling in his finance career, and before we married, he suggested a prenuptial agreement due to our differing financial situations. It didn't bother me. My love for him had nothing to do with money. I was marrying Logan for the person he was, not his bank account. However, his mother, Margot, wasn't as easily won over. She was cold from the start, distant and skeptical, never offering a warm welcome into their family. But I was too happy, too caught up in my love for Logan to let her disapproval affect me. Even when we faced heartbreaking news, Logan's infertility, I didn't waver. Instead, I focused on creating a warm, loving home for us, pouring my savings into furniture, appliances, and the little details that made a house feel like a sanctuary. But over time, something changed. The warmth that once existed between us slowly faded, replaced by a growing coldness. Logan's tone became sharper, his requests turning into demands. "Make sure breakfast is ready before I leave, Eliza," he would say, his voice devoid of the tenderness it once held. I was juggling a demanding job at the Department of Health and Human Services, yet I still made every effort to ensure he had fresh, elaborate dinners waiting for him. I hoped my dedication would bring back the love we once had, but no matter how hard I tried, Logan barely acknowledged my efforts. Gone were the affectionate words and laughter. We only spoke when necessary, and even then, our conversations often ended in arguments. "This is my house, Eliza," he snapped one evening, his words cutting deeper than he realized. I blinked in disbelief. I had contributed so much, financially and emotionally, to our home, and yet, he made me feel as though I was just a guest, an afterthought in the place we built together. I had once feared the idea of being alone, but suddenly, it didn't seem so frightening anymore. If anything, the thought of a life without this constant tension felt like a relief. One evening, as I sat alone in our living room, the weight of our failing marriage pressed heavily on my chest. Logan had become a stranger. The love that once tethered me to him had withered, leaving behind nothing but a hollow ache. And yet, I stayed, afraid of the unknown, of starting over with no clear path ahead. I tried to fill the growing void in our marriage with distractions. I wandered through malls alone, buying new furniture and home gadgets, hoping that material things might bring some semblance of happiness. But the moment I returned home, the fleeting joy disappeared, replaced by the painful reality of our crumbling relationship. Then, one day, I noticed something alarming. Logan hadn't contributed to our joint account in months. Mortgage payments, utilities, groceries, everything had been falling on me. The realization was a gut punch. I had assumed we were in this together, but the financial burden had become mine alone. I gathered my courage and approached him one evening. He was lounging in his chair, eyes glued to the television. "Logan, we need to talk about our finances. You haven't added anything to the joint account in months." "I've been covering everything," I said, my voice steady but firm. Without looking at me, he scoffed. "It's my house. You're just living in it. Why should I pay for your upkeep?" His words knocked the air from my lungs. "My upkeep? Logan, I'm your wife. I've been paying for everything, our mortgage, the bills, our food. I've been trying to make this a home for us both." He barely reacted, just shrugged like it was nothing. "Eliza, you're making a big deal out of nothing. If you don't like it, maybe you should just leave, but let's be real, you have nowhere to go." I was too stunned to speak. Before I could gather my thoughts, his phone rang. It was Margot. He answered on speaker before I had a chance to leave the room. "Eliza, you need to stop this nonsense and show some gratitude," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Logan's been too good to you, and you're acting like a freeloader." Her words felt like a slap. I reached for the phone and ended the call myself. "I can't believe you and your mother think I'm a freeloader," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. Logan smirked. "Well, if the shoe fits." That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I felt utterly alone. Thoughts of divorce, once fleeting, now took root in my mind. But where would I go? I had no apartment, no savings of my own. I felt trapped in a life that no longer felt like mine. The next morning, Logan was gone before I woke up, and the silence in the house was deafening. I went through the motions of my day, but my mind was elsewhere. That evening, I worked late, caught up in meetings and deadlines. By the time I got home, it was well past our usual dinner hour. The house was dark, eerily silent, but the moment I stepped inside, Logan's voice exploded like thunder. "Where the hell have you been? A good wife would have dinner ready. What are you even good for?" I inhaled sharply, my exhaustion turning into anger. "Logan, I had to work. You know this project is important." He wasn't listening. "A bad wife and a terrible hostess, that's what you are." Then, he did something I wasn't expecting. He shoved divorce papers into my hands. "You'll be homeless without me," he sneered, a cruel smirk on his face. Something inside me snapped. Living in a shelter would be better than spending one more day with you. Without hesitation, I signed the papers. And just like that, I was free. There was finally a glimmer of hope in the overwhelming darkness that had consumed my life for so long. With the help of a kind soul, I applied for a program that could offer me a fresh start. To my astonishment, I was accepted. The weight on my chest lifted almost instantly. I could finally breathe again. Now, I live in a small but cozy apartment that belongs entirely to me. It may not be luxurious, but it is peaceful, quiet, and most importantly, mine. It is a stark contrast to the chaos and suffocation I had endured in my past life. No more waking up early just to tiptoe around, afraid of disturbing someone who never appreciated me. No more walking on eggshells, trying to appease a man who took me for granted. It's just me now, and for the first time in ages, that thought fills me with an incredible sense of relief. As I sit on my couch, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, I allow myself a moment of reflection. The road to this point has not been easy. There were days when fear and doubt almost made me turn back, but there were also unexpected moments of kindness from people who saw my struggle and offered a hand. Each of those moments has brought me here, to this place of newfound strength. For the first time in a long while, I am looking toward the future with hope rather than dread. I have an empty canvas in front of me, ready to be filled with new experiences, new memories, and a life that is truly my own. It is a fresh start, and I am ready to embrace it. The months passed in peaceful solitude, and I settled into a routine that felt simple yet fulfilling. But then, on an otherwise uneventful afternoon, my phone rang, shattering the quiet. The screen flashed a name I had not seen in a long time, Margot, my ex-mother-in-law. My stomach twisted in an instinctive reaction, but I answered anyway, bracing myself for whatever storm was about to hit me. "Hello?" I said cautiously. "Eliza, you need to come back to Logan right this instant." Margot's voice shrieked through the receiver, so loud that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. I sighed, already exhausted by the conversation that had barely begun. "Margot, why would I do that?" My question was rhetorical. I already knew whatever she was about to say would be laced with entitlement and misplaced urgency. "Because he's in trouble. That foolish son of mine made some terrible financial decisions, bought shares, took out loans, and now he's drowning in debt. It's a disaster, and you need to help him fix it," she barked, her voice a mix of desperation and rage. I couldn't help but let out a small, incredulous laugh, not because any of it was funny, but because the sheer audacity was beyond belief. "Help him, Margot? Do you remember the prenup, the one Logan himself insisted on? It clearly states that I am not responsible for his debts, and let's not forget the most important detail here, we are divorced. His financial mess is not my problem," I said firmly, my patience wearing thin. A sharp intake of breath came from the other end of the line. "Ungrateful girl, after everything we've done for you, you're just going to abandon him?" Her words dripped with accusation, as if I owed them something. I took a deep breath, steadying my resolve. "Everything you've done for me? Let's be honest, Margot, the only thing you and Logan ever did was make my life miserable. And as for abandoning him, need I remind you that he was the one who threw me out? He made it very clear that I was no longer wanted in his life. Well, I listened, I left, and I have no intention of going back. You'll regret this, Eliza. You think you're better off without him, but you're making a huge mistake," she spat venomously. I exhaled slowly, feeling an unexpected sense of calm settle over me. "Margot, I have spent too much of my life filled with regret and fear. I am finally finding peace, and I fully intend to keep it that way. Ending that call felt like the closing of a heavy door, one I had kept slightly ajar for far too long. But now, it was shut, locked, and I had no intention of looking back. There was no guilt, no second guessing. Instead, an overwhelming sense of relief washed over me. I had finally freed myself from the endless cycle of manipulation and obligation. As I sat back, inhaling deeply, I realized that this was a defining moment. I had spent years trying to please people who never truly cared about me, but now, I was living for myself, my life, my happiness, my decisions. No more guilt-tripping, no more bending to the will of others. I was free. The next morning, I woke up with a newfound determination. It was time to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I pulled out a folder containing receipts for all the major purchases I had made while living with Logan, the high-end dishwasher, the washing machine, the premium coffee machine he insisted was a necessity but had never contributed a dime toward. With the help of a moving truck and a few hired hands, I returned to what was once our home, though now it felt like nothing more than a hollow shell of a past life. As my belongings were carried out, I felt an odd mix of satisfaction and sadness. The memories attached to these items lingered, but I knew that clinging to them would only slow my progress. Just as the last of my things were being loaded, my phone buzzed. Logan, the call I had been expecting. He wasted no time with pleasantries. "Where is all my stuff?" he demanded, his voice laced with outrage. I let out a small chuckle, shaking my head. "You mean the things I paid for, the things I have every right to take?" "Yes, Logan, I reclaimed them." His response was a string of anger-fueled insults, but unlike before, his words no longer had power over me. "Logan," I said, cutting through his rant with unwavering calm, "I wish you well, but we are done, completely." And with that, I ended the call. Then, without a second thought, I blocked his number. It was a small action, but it symbolized so much more. It was the final cut, the last thread tying me to a past that no longer served me. As the truck drove away, taking with it the last remnants of my old life, I felt lighter than I had in years. This wasn't just about taking back my belongings, it was about taking back my independence, my confidence, my self-worth. 7 months later, I stood at the threshold of a new life, one filled with possibilities I had never dared to imagine before.